Rising to fame on TikTok, our Christine Samra caught up with the man known as Mr. Barricade.
How did you've amassed quite a following on TikTok. How did this all get started?
Well, I've been showcasing my work for some time within my industry. Over the last few years, we did a huge project in downtown San Jose, and I've had an online presence within the niche of urban planning for some time. People have known me as Mr. Barricade from when I worked with the city of San Jose, and I had a slight Instagram, but a small Instagram profile just showcasing the work to people who are interested in this type of work. But those type of social media platforms are more where I tell people, hey, I have an Instagram, go check it out, rather than TikTok, which really kind of sends it out to a lot of people. And also the way the TikTok algorithm works, it sends stuff out locally to folks. So it's based on GPS as well. So it's a really interesting outreach tool. And I started posting I made a TikTok in November, no, in September of last year. And I started just experimenting with the algorithm. And then in November, I started posting dance videos just of myself, just for fun, following the trends, understanding the algorithm a little bit more. And I amassed a following from that without really me using my voice or talking about my work too much at all. And I've always been Mr. Barricade. And then I started, people who would join my live streams were very interested in my work. And because they would see what I was doing and I would talk to people about that, I'd give advice to folks who were either in the urban planning space or people who needed career advice. And I built a following that's kind of unrelated to my urban planning field in the beginning. And then around January or February, then I started to post more content about my work and issues and topics. And then now I have it being what I ever wanted it to be, is to be a page where I get to showcase my personality and also showcase the work and issues with urban planning and teach people things that I repeat a lot when I do community outreach meetings and when I work with different cities. And so it's turned into a great tool to communicate to folks in the Bay Area and outside about urban issues, transportation issues, and what changes could be coming to their town.
What Explain to people that may not understand, what exactly is urban planning?
Sure. So our cities do a lot of implementation of projects in coordination with their community. I myself am trained as a civil engineer, and so I work with urban planners. I'm not an urban planner from training, but I do speak on urban planning issues. So urban planning is basically the systems of our governments trying to set up things for all types of people, for trying to balance things for not only people who are driving, walking, biking, but also regarding all of our social services and anything that the city really does. It's a really broad spectrum where it can be from community outreach, volunteer organizations, to how do you coordinate with police. It's a wide variety of things, but it's basically the programmatic aspect of the city. I myself am a civil engineer where we design and build infrastructure, and civil engineering consists of a few main topics. It consists of geotechnical or soil, geology-based engineering. It has some structural engineering, water resources engineering, environmental engineering, construction management, and transportation engineering, which is my specialty, which interacts a lot with urban planning.
How do you civil engineering isn't the most exciting topic unless you're in that space. How did you make it into TikTok to get people? I mean, you have a ton of followers all over the country. I'm imagining all different age ranges, those who may not have ever been into civil engineering until they're seeing your videos. What makes Mr. Barricade a success, you think?
Sure. So I'd say civil engineering affects us all quite a bit, and people just haven't had the exposure to either talking to a civil engineer or civil engineers maybe not being the best at communicating these to everybody. But it's really something that affects us all, and it's been affecting our human species since the beginning of us, since the Indus Valley civilization, or just folks wanting to build homes and not let them be washed away from the elements or wind or etc. Civil engineering has been around from the beginning of our civilization. And so from Silk Road to Indus Valley civilization, building paths and drains, aqueducts, it's always been around and been probably one of the most central parts of us as a species as we've evolved and set ourselves up in different cities. And so what I've been doing with Mr. Barricade is I've been kind of leveling and communicating to different types of people in a very short, bite-sized, short-form video. And when I work with a lot of different folks in community outreach, like I said, I repeat myself quite a bit because I'm working with different communities. And if I could break down, if I could kind of arbitrarily break down the type of people that we're affecting into like 4 main categories, right? And so we have the hardcore folks, like what we call NIMBYs, or folks who say, not in my backyard. They may go do their research on how to derail a project, go look at the EIR and push for things that are based on their own personal conflictions with the project, and try to push the project to be derailed or be manipulated by their own personal stuff, even though the project is for everybody. So that when we do big projects, it's for everybody, it's for the whole community, but there's folks who try to derail it for their own personal interests. We have those folks. We also have hardcore bicycle activists that push for only bike lanes and don't really listen to anybody else about anything other than shared lanes and bike lanes. And we're actually going to put those folks in a similar category as these NIMBY folks, the folks that push based on one aspect of complete streets, which really involves everything. And when I say complete streets, people think I'm talking about active transportation and bike lanes, but really complete streets are about working with the businesses on their parking, freight loading, all the drainage. But a lot of times people focus on bike infrastructure because that's been lacking over the last 50, 60 years. So that ends up becoming the main thing that people see, but there's really a lot more to it. And so I put these folks into this category. Now we have a lot of families and young families that are interested but concerned. They may want to ride with their kids. They just don't know. They don't feel that the facilities are safe. They may not know about how the best routes are. And there's people who want to get into these facilities and utilize their communities, but they just haven't. And we'll put those folks here. And we also have a huge category of folks who maybe don't know much about how much power they have. They may not speak the language, or they may not have the vocabulary to speak to their city. They may also be undocumented and may not feel comfortable talking to about crosswalks and stuff like that, but they really, their child is affected by the crosswalk just like everybody else. And we need to enable and empower those folks to be able to give them either a platform to speak or at least for us to listen. And so civil engineering and urban planning already have conflicting interests as well within this space. Urban planners may talk about people and the theory and our long range goals, and civil engineers are talking about the physics of drainage, soil, and water, and they're talking about finances. And there's already a disconnect there, and there's a disconnect in the community. And what I'm trying to do with the TikTok is explain to people why we can't do expensive things everywhere for the people, for the finances. I'm trying to explain to people how something could help others and affect others. And I'm really giving a holistic approach, not only explaining why we do the things, but also what the detail of a curb and paint should look like, or what the type of sign is. And I think that's what's made Mr. Barricade, or at least the way I'm doing this, very successful in not only in my community outreach meetings when I work on my real projects, or when I put together slideshows or present it in the field, and then when I work with contractors, is that I've always prided myself in continuing to practice communicating really complex things in a short form. And I'd say that's something that is missing in our industry quite a bit.
What would be the end game of the Mr. Barricade persona? Is it to get people to vote, to get people to understand? What are you really the end goal and you're trying to achieve with these TikToks?
I'd say it has a lot to do with what you've mentioned and more. I want people to be involved in their city government. Typically, the people who are involved in the city government are a very stereotypical type of folks who have the time to do their research, have the money to do their research, have the privilege to be able to take off from work at 3 p.m. or hire a babysitter to go to the actual meeting. And a lot of folks aren't empowered to have those conversations, either because they don't know, or they don't know the language, or etc. And what I hope with Mr. Barricade is to re-engage the community and re-empower them. Even in the Bay Area, when I work in different communities, you have different levels of communication. You know, if I were to say, when I work in projects in the peninsula, I get a lot of folks who have the time to come to the meetings, and they heavily invest in the projects. And sometimes they'll even say, hey, I drew something up. Can you make this work? And I'm like, wow, you drew something up and you came to the meeting. And you have other folks who, when I work on projects in the East Bay, there's folks who are just trying to figure out what's going on in their community because the city has not done a lot in many, many years. And so they're trying to figure out, hey, can you guys do this? Or they're just trying to understand a little bit more. And just the disparity in the communication or in just how the city operates is huge just within our own community. And that has to do with not only historical lack of communication, but also just lack of funding. A lot of these cities just don't have a tax base that actually can support them reinvesting into their community. And so I hope with this is that I may help enable the community to push their city to either apply for grants or get to the next get some consistency across the Bay Area to really give everybody the same opportunity that we have everywhere. You know, and I'd say in the Bay Area, we are a lot more ahead of the game in terms of active transportation and thinking about race and historical inequalities in the rest of the country. And so by me making the TikTok and showcasing what we're doing, what we're struggling with, because we don't have the answers either for a lot of this stuff. And if I can showcase that to the rest of the world, when other areas start getting the same, I would say, Bay Area issues of high traffic, income inequality, a lot amount of tech firms moving to other places, and there just being a disconnect from tech industry and the rest of the community. I'd say that those issues are going to be coming and spreading to the rest of the country. And by me making the TikTok, I can showcase, hey, you're eventually going to have tech buses. You're eventually going to have scooter issues. And all of these things that we've been struggling with, I think we have some great solutions for. And those solutions are not going to be the same everywhere, but at least I can highlight those solutions and issues in this video very transparent.
Is there, I know that you highlighted the region in San Jose, and then your recent TikTok was for people to comment and say what the worst road is in their area.
Mm-hmm.
What's been in your career, what in the Bay Area, what's been the worst roadway that you've worked on that has had the biggest makeover?
Well, it's an interesting question because there's different reasons why I may dislike certain corridors. Either it could be because of a design, it could be because of something political that is happening there. It could be because there's a lack of goals of implementation. I'd say so. It varies quite a bit. Without calling out specific roads or specific cities, what I will say is I've worked on some projects where kind of what I mentioned earlier, that where the community, maybe in the peninsula, where the community is heavily involved and they really try to put their own input on the project, and the project ends up becoming a very different project each segment of the road for the community. And I worked on other projects in the East Bay where the city is just not trying to tell too many people about the project, trying to have the project meetings only at 3 p.m. because it's already got a lot of political nightmare, and they're just trying to get something done before the funds dry up. And so that's not fun to work on either of these two, because one, we're just trying to put something halfway together because the funds are going to go away. Another is because we're spinning our wheels for an extra 10 years and the kids are already graduated high school. And so I'd say there's definitely issues with lack of funding and differences in different communities. When I made a TikTok, there's a lot of folks to ask people about, when I made a TikTok asking people about what the worst intersection is, there's a lot of different reasons why people would not like an intersection. And I thought that seeing that in the comment section and seeing other people see that in the comment section really, I think, is useful to folks. Sometimes I might be responding to those things and sometimes other people might be responding to it, but I think it really brings up the conversation of two folks, that it's really a balance when it comes to this.
So in the Gate, you did an interview with them, and they mentioned how your work has helped with bike lanes. Do you want to explain a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I started a company named Crossroad Lab 4 years ago, and we are a civil engineering consulting firm that's competing with other civil engineering firms in the area. And we help cities design and plan and implement bike infrastructure, roadway infrastructure, complete street support. We've done a lot of work in the South Bay mainly so far, and we're doing more work in the East Bay. But we did a huge project in downtown San Jose that really kind of set us up well in the very beginning. This was a 16-mile project where we did around 56 protected corners in the downtown core of San Jose. And then many people would recognize that as being the green posts you see in downtown San Jose, where we flipped the parking and the bike lane. Now that project was a big project where we had to do a lot of outreach with the community, working with the businesses, and totally flip the downtown. If you remember how San Jose was years ago and how it is now, it's a very different feel. Well, you doing that project in San Jose has been groundbreaking for the whole Bay Area, because people have been talking about tactical urbanism or quick build or protected intersections, which is all these buzzwords that people have been talking about for 10 years now. And when we did that project, it gave validity and physical design to those facilities. And so other cities in the region, such as Oakland, Santa Clara, Cupertino, they weren't ready to implement these kind of facilities yet until another city did that in the Bay Area. And when the San Jose implemented that, it helped a lot, give a lot of them the confirmation and the assurance that it's possible. Their community, people from Oakland would come down to San Jose and be like, hey, this is not too bad. And then that gave it gave some comfort for them. And we've seen a lot more progress throughout the whole Bay Area from that project and more projects that other cities are doing and that we've done. We don't work with all the cities yet. We work mostly with a lot of the smaller cities that don't try to do the work in-house. Cities, big cities like Oakland, San Jose, and San Francisco, they're larger cities that have budget, and they try to train and manage in-house design teams to do this work. Whereas smaller cities such as Emeryville, Cupertino, and they don't have as much staff, and they more hire firms like us to help bring the best practices of the country to their city. Whereas a city like San Jose or Oakland, San Francisco is doing their research to figure out the best practice of the country for their city with in-house staff. And so we've helped a lot of cities, small cities out, and we've also, I'd say our projects have helped a lot of the bigger cities learn from our projects and teach their staff to copy them.
When you're out and about and not working, are you constantly checking out roads that you're driving down and assessing and making notes?
Yes, and so that's been a curse of being in this industry, is that you see things that nobody else sees. And over the years, when I've hung out with friends, either when we go out in San Francisco or when we're together, I'd be the one who'd stop and be like, "Hey, did you guys see this? It looks weird." And like, shut up, big nose, you know. And so I've always been that kind of person. Before TikTok, I used to post a lot on Snapchat to my friends, and most of my friends are in the tech industry because I grew up in Cupertino, and a lot of people get into the tech industry there. And even I learned to program at a young age because that's what everybody did from there. But the audience wasn't necessarily the audience that I think received it well as much as it is on TikTok now, where because TikTok helped me find a niche that appreciates that content. And so now, whenever I'm anywhere, I can make videos about what's going on in that area or issues with a ramp or something. And it's something that I've always found interesting. And now I have found folks that also find it interesting. And I'm always able to make it sound interesting the way I speak about it or how I explain things. I try to use simple words when explaining stuff because I'm talking to a wide variety of people. And these are things that I've learned over the years. I had a meeting in San Jose where it was translated by somebody who was doing sign language and in Vietnamese for the Vietnamese community. And while I was giving the speech and there's somebody translating in sign language in Vietnamese, I used the word like, "Oh, and then we're going to put rubberized asphalt on the road." And they both looked at me like, "What did you say? Like, how do I translate this?" And so I realized I have to explain things a little bit simpler and differently to folks. And TikTok is a way for me to not only practice doing that, but also just highlight issues that I see.
How long does it take you to make your videos?
For a minute video, it takes anywhere from 4 minutes to 15 minutes, I'd say. Sometimes I do retake the videos a few times, to be honest with you, because I don't really plan out the videos as well that much. I more go out there and I'll say something and I'll be like, you know what, I actually want to talk about something more, and I'll retake the video, or I'll try and take the video to get like somebody in the background. But a lot of my videos, I don't get a lot of cyclists in the videos, even though there's a lot of cyclists out there. It's just kind of hard to have the right sentence, use the right word, not to stutter, and get something happening in the background. There's a lot going on at the same time. That's just what I think makes TikTok a lot less barrier of entry for me. If I was doing it on YouTube or some other platform, I'd feel the need to make an intro and edit it and do a bunch of that other stuff. But with TikTok, it's very much like the next level from making like a Snapchat story. And I feel that makes it a lot more personable to folks. And the type of content that I've been making is not all about roads. Some of it is about my music choice, Indian American experiences, different cultural issues. I might talk about some vaccine rollout or mask wearing or other types of things that affect the Bay Area. And what I've noticed with my followers and fans is a lot of young people are now interested in civil engineering and urban planning. A lot of people who are from different minority groups who may not have been exposed to that are now really interested in that, because there's not a lot of folks from minority background in this industry. Because it's an old industry, you know, and most people would go study computer science or something that's more popular, but for B2B in this industry, I've definitely seen a lot of folks who message me asking how they can find more information about it. And it's really exciting to see where this is going to go in the future. And I feel it's the right time for this because we've been talking in my industry, we've been talking about historical inequalities and issues with urban planning for a very, very long time. I would say 2018 and 2019 was a really great year. We're talking about historical redlining and issues with equity and issues with community outreach when working with different immigrant communities, refugee communities. We were talking about that a lot in 2019. And then 2020 happened, and all the issues that we were talking about were highlighted in full force when COVID happened in terms of getting the communication for the vaccine, issues with project implementation, all of that was highlighted in full force. And a lot of people in the community realized, hey, these urban planning issues are really what's affecting when we talk about police brutality. The ability for people to walk around the community and social distances is really has to do with urban design and urban planning. And businesses being open is really just a policy and programmatic aspects of urban planning. And so I'd say a lot of that has been highlighted in 2020, and people are realizing that, hey, who's the person that have to go bug? And they find out after they worked their way up the ladder, they find out there's a civil engineer sitting behind a desk at some city who's really the decision maker. And that's how I found out about civil engineering, honestly, is when I had an issue, I worked my way, talked to a bunch of planners, and I found, hey, there's an engineer who's doesn't actually know about my issue, who's actually the person they're waiting to make a decision. And that could be a city manager or a civil engineer. And typically the city manager is a civil engineer at the end of the day. And so I feel with this platform, it's giving people more access to that content and information. And I know that's something that people are been yearning for a very, very long time.
What made you get into this?
You mean into the field or into social media?
Into the field.
I've always had an interest of getting into city life. I have a personal dream of mine that I've had since I was like 16 that's kind of led me to this point. It has to do with land ownership. It's kind of personal to me, but what it is growing up growing up in the Bay, you see a lot of road names that are named after old historic names of people who had owned that property for many, many, many years ago. And like such as McClellan or Hamilton or Cherry, and I always was curious about how those names came to be because I had friends and family in Cupertino who had those last names. And when I found out about friends who had not family, but I had friends who had that last name, and I found out that's because their grandfather's grandfather owned that property in Cupertino and they've been established. And over the years, I wanted to learn more about how that works and how road names are built and how land ownership is. And I got into civil engineering and urban planning. And I was trying to mess with a parking app many years ago with my friends in college, and I was approaching different cities asking for data for this parking app. And when I approached the city of San Jose, they didn't have data organized for parking, and they offered me a job. And then I got my internship with the city of San Jose in the parking division from there. And then I just fell in love with working with downtown San Jose and working with communities and businesses and events. My first job at the city of San Jose was very exciting in downtown operations, where I managed cones and barricades for the city of San Jose. So if there was a festival or marathon or rock and roll marathon or jazz festival, I was the one responsible for coordinating the cones and street closures with police and volunteers. And that's when people started calling me Mr. Barricade. And I had a little nameplate called Mr. Barricade, and it became so well organized. The city actually used to market downtown as a place to host events because we became organized in how to manage that. And I managed the permits and fees for for any kind of block party or a farmer's market. And I planned out Obama's route from the airport to his hotel, which was like very, very exciting with different types of barricades and more. And that's when I was really exposed to some of the first bike lanes that they implemented in downtown when we first tried to figure out what a bike lane is and how it's going to affect parking. And I was a parking person at that time. And I also opened my eyes to how we can change the culture of a street in a matter of hours. The road like Santa Clara is a busy arterial road. In a matter of hours, we changed it to have a race or change it to have a party. And we're drinking permits were in the street. And I could see that, hey, just in a matter of hours, it's a total different city, a total different culture. And I knew that's possible when we do bike lane and roadway projects. And I went to go work for a highway consulting firm after. And I was very annoyed that a simple bike lane project, when they're just trying to ask for a buffered bike lane or something, was derailed by not only by the city and the consultant community who wanted to either charge more or do more work on the project, saying, hey, you need ramps, you need swales, you need trees, you need signals, and they keep adding more to the projects. And the city is just like, yeah, we need all this stuff. And in reality, the community is just trying to get something done. And I was very frustrated with how long projects took at my old consulting firm. They were a highway consulting firm, and they were approaching local projects from a highway planning perspective. And that's honestly how our Caltrans and government is set up. And then I did a lot of research to figure out what triggers aspect in CEQA and NEPA in our environmental procedures. And there's certain things that can really derail projects, such as adding new pavement, it makes more impervious area, or taking away a lane triggers environmental. And I developed a new project delivery system called Quick Build, which is something that's already been used throughout the country, but I did it. I was our firm was one of the first folks to do it with actual roadway design, with intersections and signal timing and more. And that is really, I would say, is the main future of this type of infrastructure. Doing projects with paint and plastic is secretly a form of community outreach. In showcasing that as a way of, instead of me bringing everybody into a room for a PowerPoint presentation, showing them pictures of Seattle and saying, this is what could come to your community, actually drawing up what can happen there and maybe even implementing that in a small way so people can go and have a look and feel is one of the best ways of community outreach. And what's also good is making a short video about it or showcasing, explaining that. I found that when I do community outreach, we get a certain amount of people that come to the meetings and feedback. But when I put a lawn sign in the intersection or at the corner that has a cell phone number or a QR code, we get more input from people walking and biking down the street than we do from all the city efforts where the city puts money into putting community outreach. And so that makes me feel that we're doing something entirely wrong when we do our outreach, where we're not connecting to the community in the way that they can connect. And that could be either in the field at the corner with a sign, or maybe in a video on social media, and more. And I doing it in the old school way, I don't think is the I wouldn't say that's the after COVID and everything we've seen from that, I don't think that's very appropriate.
Well, this was great. I think what you're doing is great. And then real quick, just for some background. So you're born and raised in Cupertino?
I was born in Maryland, and I lived in Sunnyvale since I was 3 years old. And I've been in the South Bay, Sunnyvale, West San Jose, and Cupertino. And I went to most of my schooling in Cupertino from 3rd grade on. I also sit as a Cupertino Sustainability Commission chair. So the different cities have different commissions and committees, and I'm the chair for sustainability that has to do with waste, green buildings, energy, biking, walking, housing, equity, clean creeks and clean streets, and more. And then I also sit in Valley Transportation Agency, VTA's Citizen Advisory Committee Chair and Citizen Watchdog Committee Chair, where I'm the liaison between the community and the elected officials. Our group is, and we also hire independent auditors to do a third-party check of VTA's expenditures for Measure A, 2000 Measure A budgetary plan. And those two roles have helped me get a good local handle on local issues in the South Bay, and also be able to provide expertise on complete streets and active transportation. And so I've been doing roadway transportation stuff from before the TikTok, and everybody knew me as being the person who talks about roads and stops to look at stuff. And if my friends take a photo of something, I'll be like, oh, you're in Seaside, because Seaside puts pointy things on their street signs. And they're like, shut up, right? But so I've always been that person. And so TikTok has really been a way for me to highlight that aspect of my life that I really enjoy of personality, and find folks who are attracted to that, and also help communicate that to all types of people to make this interesting.
Well, this is great. This is perfect. Do you want to add anything else before we wrap this up? I know I'm going beyond the time. Any other notes?
No worries. I'd say that my firm is growing, and we want to be a local-based firm. A lot of the firms that compete with us are more national firms that do this across the country. And I'd say that when I've seen them do their work here in the Bay Area, it doesn't highlight the local issues of the Bay Area. Bay Area is a very unique place with a lot of unique income inequality, unique demographic, and our history, I'd say, is quite old and also very recent, because we've been going through a lot of change over the last 20, 30 years. And way I see this going with COVID and people leaving California and going to other states is these type of issues and will need solutions everywhere as we get to self-driving cars and we start becoming less and less urban sprawl and more dense. And we hope to help cities out with the solutions that we've developed here, and also to work and hire locally to enable the community and be a presence in the community as a consultancy. That's not really common in a lot of other consultancies, is having an actual local presence, but that's how we feel we should approach these projects to give it a much more personable feel than a big highway company doing big projects in your community.